Shin is a carefree, annoying boy, living in the Republic of San Magnolia with his scientist parents. Little did Shin know, his family wasn't just ordinary scientists, they were descendants of a noble bloodline from the Jaidean Empire, known for their telepathic abilities. Life seemed perfect, especially with his older brother, Shiri, who he looked up to like a hero. Shiri was the cool, Honkai Star Rail-looking big brother Shin idolized and spent most of his time with. The two brothers were inseparable, always laughing and pretending their happy days would last forever. Sometimes, Shin would tag along when his parents worked with their colleagues on research. He even hung out with a coworker's kid, though she always seemed less interested in playtime. But Shin's life was about to get a harsh wake-up call. Everything changed when the Jaidean Empire declared war on the Republic of San Magnolia, unleashing terrifying, ghost-in-the-shell-style robots called the Legion. The Republic claimed they'd respond with their own automated war machines, promising an ethical battle with no human soldiers involved. Spoiler, that was all a massive lie. Since then, Shin's only friend turned on him, calling him dirty and refusing to play with him. The Republic then divided its land into 85 sectors for the Alba silver-haired, silver-eyed folks who were considered the elite. But behind closed doors, they forced anyone who wasn't Alba enough into the hidden 86th sector, a ghetto where these outcasts were made to pilot the war machines. Shin's family was betrayed by their Alba friends, ended up there too, just another group of disposable soldiers. Clueless to the reality of his situation, Shin didn't fully grasp what was happening. One day, he stopped hearing his mom's voice and asked Shiri where their parents were. True to tragic anime style, their parents had died off-screen, leaving the brothers on their own. Shiri was overwhelmed, not just from losing their parents, but also from receiving a draft letter telling him to sacrifice his life for San Magnolia. In his grief, Shiri snapped. He lashed out at Shin, choking him and blaming him for everything that had happened. Shiri shouted that their parents died protecting Shin, and warned that he would die the same way because San Magnolia doesn't care about people like them. Shin nearly ended up another tragic backstory statistic, but a priest heard the screams and intervened just in time, pulling Shiri away and giving Shin CPR. Realizing his mistake, Shiri promised himself to protect his little brother from fighting in the future. But it was a promise he couldn't keep. The Republic also had no intention of letting Shin escape the war, drafting him just like his brother before him. Things only got worse when Shin found Shiri's body inside his war machine, decapitated and abandoned on the battlefield. Shin kept fighting in the war and eventually rose to the rank of captain of the Spearhead Squadron, an elite defense unit in the 86th Sector's 1st Combat Ward. They had the best soldiers around, though they didn't stay around for long. Now older and tougher, Shin had grown into the ultimate edgelord of the battlefield. He took his job seriously, so seriously, in fact, that he'd finish off his gravely injured comrades himself, denying the enemy the kill and taking it as his own. After every battle, he'd collect the personal mark tags of the fallen, carving their names into each one to ensure they'd never be forgotten. One day, Shin's squad gets a new handler, a pompous but virtuous Alba girl named Lena, who's just been promoted to oversee Spearhead. She syncs with the squad, introducing herself as their new handler. When she reaches out to Shin, he tells her his personal name, Undertaker. All 86 soldiers had personal names that their handlers used to refer to them. So Shin's squad takes the news of a new handler in stride. Shin, ever the professional, tells Lena he's looking forward to working with her. Earlier, Lena had met with General Karlstall, the one who urgently assigned her to Spearhead. Turns out, the previous handler had resigned, driven mad by Shin's relentless and unnerving intensity. General Karlstall blamed Shin, who had earned a reputation for driving handlers insane, making them quit, or worse, sending themselves straight into the Shadow Realm. They didn't call him Undertaker for nothing. Shin had seen more handlers than most could count, and not many could handle him. After her meeting with the general, Lena went to see her friend Annette, one of the scientists behind the military's para-raid devices, basically Bluetooth headsets on steroids. Lena had big dreams of turning these into something like an Apple Vision Pro, syncing with her unit's hearing and visual senses so she could watch the battle in real time, just like a Twitch livestream. But Annette shut her down, explaining that it wasn't a Call of Duty match, it was war, and the overload could drive her insane. Even the current para-raids were already pushing the limits of what the brain could handle. In the end, Lena had to settle for a voice chat boosted with all the bells and whistles of Discord Nitro. She'd listen to her squad's voices and track the battle through her radar. The next day, the Spearhead squad preps for battle again. The enemy, the Legion, those rogue war machines from the Jaidean Empire, were on the move, sending 4 units toward their territory. They'd be hitting the squad's ward within 2 hours, but without a commander, known as a shepherd, leading them, it seemed like an easy win. Seeing the opportunity, Shin ordered the squad to ambush the Legion and take down as many of their forces as possible. As the squad fired up their juggernauts, Lena finally contacted them, ready to issue orders to intercept the Legion. But by then, Shin and his team were already deployed at the front lines. Impressed by their initiative, she let them proceed with their advance into the Legion's formation. As the Legion drew closer, the squad unleashed a barrage of fire, blasting the enemy in all directions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. A Scorpion, a Legion spotting unit designed for long-range attacks, spotted them and began bombarding with heavy artillery. Shin quickly noticed the threat and ordered the squad to spread out, narrowly evading the incoming shells. Lena jumped in, alerting them to the Scorpion's exact location, and Shin used her intel to send platoons out to take down the spotters. But it wasn't over yet. As the battle raged on, Raiden realized there were way too many Legion tank units called Lows. Shin decided to handle the Lows himself while Raiden and the others focused on the remaining units. Raiden provided wingman support, clearing a path for Shin, maybe hoping to score some points with Lena, who was clearly paying attention. Shin specialized in dismantling the enemy with speed and precision, and he zipped through the Lows, taking them out and retreating before they could mount a counterattack. He significantly thinned their numbers, leaving just a few behind, which seemed to boost Lena's admiration for him even more. By dawn, the Legion had pulled back, leaving the Spearhead squad to watch the sunrise in the aftermath of the battle. Meanwhile, back in the Republic, a class of Alba Gen Z kids were getting their sanitized version of the war's history. 9 years ago, the Jayad Empire declared war on San Magnolia, deploying an army of autonomous war machines known as the Legion. But the Empire soon lost control, and within 5 years, they were wiped out by their own creations. It was believed that the Legion had a hard-coded lifespan of 50,000 hours, around 6 years, meaning they'd all shut down within 2 years. The students were told they only needed to hang tight for a couple of years until the war ended. With no human casualties thanks to the Republic's supposedly autonomous juggernauts, a massive lie. Lena interrupted the class, setting the record straight. She called out the professor's BS, revealing that the juggernauts weren't autonomous at all. She explained the Republic's real history, the creation of 85 administrative sectors for the Alba, and the segregated 86th sector, where non-Alba people were forced to live and pilot the war machines. Instead of playing Fortnite or scrolling TikTok like the Alba kids, these teens were sent to the front lines with no pay and little recognition. Lena, as a handler, was responsible for commanding these units, and she wasn't about to let the Alba kids get away with their ignorance. Back at their base, the Spearhead squad was relaxing, shooting cans, and hanging out with their pet robot, Fido. Raiden asked Shin what he thought of Lena's performance in the last battle. Shin, ever the critical commander, acknowledged that she was impressive, like she had 3,000 hours logged on Total War Shogun 2. Her positioning had matched their own preemptive deployment, proving she wasn't just another Valorant or League of Legends e-girl. Still, Raiden was curious to see how long she could keep up with them. As Raiden got called away to join in on the can shooting, Anju, one of the second lieutenants known as Snow Witch, brought Shin a slice of cake before sharing with the others. She casually asked Shin about the book he was reading, something he often did to clear his mind. Later, Lena reached out to the squad after a week of silence, a rarity given how most previous handlers couldn't handle the stress of working with Spearhead for long. Shin complimented her on her performance in battle, and Lena returned the praise. But then she brought up an issue. Shin had been submitting the same type of action reports since taking over as captain. Surprised, Shin noted that no previous handler had bothered to read those reports, but Lena had. When Shin asked why she even cared about the front lines, Lena replied that it was her job as a handler to analyze Legion tactics and formations to help devise countermeasures. She urged him to take the reports seriously, but Shin jokingly claimed he didn't know how to read or write, which sent his squad into fits of laughter. As the squad continued to chat with Lena, she asked about their time in the military and learned that Shin's term was almost up. It was his final year. The squad's mechanic, Lev, called Shin over while Lena asked him about his plans after leaving the army. Shin admitted he hadn't thought about it, and Lena encouraged him to start considering his future. Shin just smiled and agreed. Another day, another call from Lena. She's made it a habit to chat with the squad outside of official duties, almost like an e-date with Shin. This doesn't sit well with Kirina, one of the second lieutenants with the personal name Gunslinger. She storms out of the room in frustration, and another second lieutenant, Daya, known as Black Dog, follows after her. Kirina vents to him about Lena, calling her a white pig because she's an Alba. She's annoyed that Lena is hogging Shin's attention, especially since every day could be their last on the battlefield. She wishes Shin would hurry up and drive Lena away, just like he did with the previous handlers. Daya reminds her that Shin doesn't scare off handlers on purpose, and he certainly wouldn't do it just to appease her grudge against Lena. Plus, she'd never say any of this to Shin's face. Kirina apologizes, but admits she can't stand Lena. Her hatred for the Alba runs deep. Her parents were killed by Alba soldiers who used them as target practice. She believes all Alba are scum she'll never forgive, and with that, she walks away from Daya. Meanwhile, Lena continues chatting with the squad, spending extra time talking to Kai, who seems to be in good spirits despite her dark fate foreshadowed by her personal name. They reminisce about a meteor shower they once saw during a battle, laughing as they joke they'll probably never see another one. Lena mentions she's never seen a meteor shower herself because the city lights are always on, hiding the stars. It's different in the first ward where the 86 are stationed. The nights are dark, but at least they can see the stars. Curious, Lena asks Kai if she hates the Alba. Kai admits she despises what the Alba have done to them, but she doesn't believe all Alba are bad, just like not all 86 are good. She doesn't hate Lena just because she's an Alba. Kai then asks why Lena cares so much about them. Lena reveals that an 86 soldier saved her life on the battlefield when she was younger, and now she wants to help people like him and fight for her country. Kai teases Lena for having such an idealistic view of the world, saying she's not cut out to be a handler. The 86 aren't fighting for noble reasons, they're just trying to survive. She warns Lena to quit while she's ahead, before she ends up regretting it. Lena says nothing in response. Later, Lena syncs up with the squad and informs them that the Legion is approaching. Shin responds that they're already gearing up to engage at a specific grid point. As the squad takes their positions, Lena directs Kirina to move 500 meters to her 2 o'clock, where she can take up a vantage point on higher ground. From there, she'll be able to provide overwatch and cover the main assault force while picking off the Legion's lows. Despite her dislike for Lena, Kirina complies and shifts to the new position. After successfully destroying the low units, Kirina reports the target down and moves her platoon out. Lena, however, notices a lone low lurking in the direction Kai is heading and quickly checks the map. She realizes Kai's headed straight into a wetland and tries to warn her, but it's too late. Lacking map awareness, Kai gets stuck, and the low closes in on her, leading to her untimely death. After the mission, Lena thanks everyone for their efforts and apologizes for Kai's death, blaming herself for not catching the map details in time. But before she can finish, Theo, another second lieutenant known as Laughing Fox, angrily cuts her off. He snaps that the 86's deaths are just numbers Lena can forget by the time she's home for dinner. They don't have time for her guilt or sympathy, they've just lost a comrade, and her feelings won't bring Kai back. Lena tries to respond, but Theo continues, saying that unlike the Alba, the 86 actually care about their comrades. If the Alba truly cared, they wouldn't have shoved the 86 into a war where they die like disposable tools. They're not fighting because they want to, it's just the hand they've been dealt, locked out of the city and forced to fight. Theo blames the Alba for the millions of lives lost over the past 9 years and tells Lena not to pretend she cares now when she's never even bothered to ask for their real names. Lena is brought to tears because she knows Theo is right. Her kindness won't magically fix things for the 86. Theo was fuming, and when Raiden tried to calm him down, Theo snapped at him, accusing him of defending Lena, the white pig. Things got heated until Shin stepped in and shut Theo down, leaving him with no choice but to quit whining like a kid. Raiden then told Lena to log off from the voice chat since nobody was in the mood to talk. Lena, taken aback, apologized and disconnected. After she was gone, Theo's anger turned into regret. He admitted he felt useless for not being able to help Kai and felt just as awful as the Alba he despised, especially for lashing out on the day Kai died. By the next day, the squad had simmered down, and they encouraged Theo to try expressing his feelings in a better way, reminding him that they all cared about Kai and were hurting too. Later that night, Shin continued his grim tradition, carving Kai's name into her personal mark fragment from her juggernaut. While he was doing this, Lena reached out to him. Before this, she had visited Annette, venting about how she couldn't stop worrying about the 86. Annette, in her usual carefree style, told Lena to just accept that the 86 were like units in a strategy game, like Company of Heroes, too disposable and replaceable. She suggested Lena indulge in some of the perks of city life, like treating herself to pudding, and just let it go. But Lena couldn't let it go. She insisted that she wanted to see the 86 as people, not just war assets. Annette wasn't convinced. She pointed out that if Lena really saw them as people, she would have asked for their names right from the start. Annette's words stuck with Lena, and later that night, she took a walk to the cemetery of the Republic's fallen soldiers. It was then that she decided to contact Shin. She apologized for everything that had happened the day before, as well as for all the misunderstandings in the past. Trying to make a genuine connection, she reintroduced herself to Shin and asked him to share the real names of the Spearhead squad members. Shin hesitated at first, explaining that getting too close to their processors was a dangerous game for handlers. It would make it nearly impossible to handle their inevitable deaths. But after a pause, he went ahead and listed the names of 20 remaining 86 members, including Kai, who Lena had known by her codename, Kirschblut. Lena listened quietly, absorbing the weight of each name, realizing they weren't just faceless soldiers. After Shin finished, Lena thanked him and asked if he could call her by her first name. Shin, still keeping his distance, decided to stick with calling her by her rank, Major. Lena then heard a scraping noise and asked Shin what he was doing. He told her he was carving Kai's name into a fragment of her juggernaut. He explained that since the 86 didn't have proper graves, his first unit had made a pact. They would carve the names of their fallen comrades into pieces of their juggernauts, and the survivors would carry them until they reached their final destination. Shin was the last survivor of that unit, so he continued the tradition with Spearhead. Lena felt a pang of guilt, knowing that Shin had been doing this for 5 years and had witnessed the deaths of 561 people, including Kai. Shin remembered every single one because he carried the weight of their names until the end of his journey. Lena apologized again and asked if she could apologize to the rest of the squad directly. Without a word, Shin connected Lena to the rest of the team, letting her speak to them as she tried to bridge the divide between her and the 86. As Lena walks home, she casually asks Shin what his brother is up to these days. Shin, without missing a beat, tells her that Shaorei died 5 years ago, typical tragic anime backstory stuff. Lena quickly apologizes, feeling a bit awkward for bringing it up. Moving on, she follows up on an earlier question about what Shin plans to do once he leaves the army. Shin admits there's nothing he particularly wants to do, but there is something he has to do. He needs to find Shaorei, who he's been searching for over the past 5 years. On another day, Lena is back on duty, commanding the Spearhead squad in battle. Curious, she asks Shin how he always seems to know when the Legion is approaching. But before he can explain, their connection starts cutting out. Shin tells her to disconnect from her para-raid because the Legion has deployed a lot of Black Sheep units this time, making it too risky to stay synchronized. Lena, unfamiliar with what the Black Sheep are, refuses to cut the connection, insisting she needs it to observe the battlefield. Shin simply warns her again and accelerates toward the Legion. Suddenly, Lena's para-raid is filled with static, but it's not just noise, it's a horrifying mix of voices, screaming and begging for help right before dying. Lena freaks out, overwhelmed by the cacophony of tortured cries. She screams, unable to hear Shin trying to reach her. She finally snaps out of it when she hears Kai's voice, begging not to die. Later, back at home, Lena can't shake the sound of Kai's voice. She sits on her bed, still rattled, and tries to write in her notebook. But when she reaches for her para-raid, the voices hit her again, flooding her senses and distorting everything around her. She panics, begging the voices to stop, until Kai's voice cuts through the chaos, calming her down as everything returns to normal. During that battle, Shin heard the voices too. The reason Lena could hear them was because Shin was live streaming his sensor data through the para-raid, linking their senses. Undeterred, Shin charged into the enemy lines, blasting away at the Legion. Raiden, hearing Lena scream through the para-raid, couldn't help but sympathize. He and the others also hear the voices when synced with Shin. Just as Shin was about to disconnect from Lena, Kai's voice broke through once more. The squad was stunned. Kai's body and juggernaut had been burned, so how was it possible? Somehow, the Legion had taken her and turned her into one of their Grawolf units. Shin quickly identified which Grawolf was Kai and ordered Kirina to take it out. Later, Raiden mentioned to Shin that the squad was feeling lonely since Lena hadn't called them. Smirking, Shin replied that most handlers never sync back after hearing those voices, and walked off. But just then, Lena called Shin again, surprising Raiden that she hadn't quit. Lena apologized for how she acted when she heard the voices and asked Shin what they were. Shin explained they were the voices of the dead still lingering the ghosts of the Legion. Finally, Lena understood how Shin could always sense the Legion's approach. He heard the voices even in his sleep, though he couldn't always pinpoint their exact location. He'd gotten used to it over time. Shin then mentioned that the Republic believed the war would end in 2 years. Lena confirmed this, saying that the Legion's central processing units were modeled after human brains, which would shut down after about 2 years. But Shin pointed out that the Legion could just replace their processing units before they expired, using the resources they scavenged from the battlefield. This included the human brains left behind, which meant the Legion was basically repurposing human minds for their own ranks. Lena was horrified to learn that some Legion units retained the voices and memories of the dead, replaying their final moments, the black sheep hidden among the white sheep. But with the black sheep now more common than ever, Shin grimly predicted that they were going to lose the war. The Legion could endlessly replace their fallen with these units, but the 86 couldn't do the same because they were human. Most of the 86 were already dead, and those who remained were mostly children, who were also being sent to the front lines. It wouldn't be long before they were all wiped out. When that happened, Shin wondered, would the Alba be ready to fight? The Republic was delusional, thinking that every 86 had the same luck as Shin, but reality was far bleaker. Many black sheep could only follow simple commands, but the shepherds could think independently and take charge. Shin could hear them too, and he knew there was one lurking near the first combat ward. He clutched his chest pocket tightly as he spoke. Lena, determined to help, vowed to do everything she could to analyze the enemy and develop strategies to wipe them out before the Legion wiped out the 86. She told Shin that she wanted them all to survive. Shin, acknowledging her resolve, simply said, "Bet," and wished her good night. The war continues, and things are not looking great. One of the processors, known as Burnt Tail, gets cornered by the Legion. She calls out for help from the 6th platoon, but they're too busy dealing with their own mess. Daya, ever the hero, tries to rush over to help her, but before he can get there, a swarm of Legion self-propelled mines latch onto his juggernaut and explode, taking him out of the game for good. With Daya gone, Burnt Tail realizes she's on her own and there's no backup coming. Not wanting to end up as one of the Legion, she gives herself a victory royale by taking her own life, blowing her brains out to avoid being turned into a mindless machine. After the battle, Shin heads over to check on Daya's juggernaut. He radios Lena, asking her to cut her para-raid connection because he doesn't want her to see what comes next. But Lena refuses, insisting that this is the least she can do as their handler. Shin, determined to make sure Daya doesn't become a Legion, pulls out his gun and shoots Daya in the head, destroying his brain. Suddenly, Shin hears Shiri's voice, triggering a painful flashback. In his mind, he's back to the day when Shiri strangled him, blaming Shin for their parents' deaths. The memory of his brother's enraged face haunts him as Shiri's Legion unit approaches. Shin tries to aim his gun at Shiri's unit, but he's paralyzed, unable to pull the trigger, lost in the image of Shiri's anger. Meanwhile, Lena heads to report the 2 casualties to General Karlstall. She requests permission to extend the range of their artillery to provide support for Spearhead from the rear, hoping to reduce future casualties. But Karlstall shuts her down with a flat nope. Instead, he tells her about a new mission for the Spearhead squad. The Republic has confirmed that the Legion has set up a new operational base near the front lines, and he wants Spearhead to eliminate it ASAP. Lena asks if they can get replacements first, but Karlstall brushes her off, saying there's no time to waste. The squad has to act now or they'll regret it later. Frustrated, but with no other choice, Lena agrees to proceed with the mission. Later that night, Lena briefs Spearhead on their new orders. She apologizes for the lack of replacements and jokes that there are no tactical nukes to back them up either. Shin cuts in, saying that they already know about the Legion base and suspects it's a trap. Days later, the Spearhead squad heads out for their mission, fully aware it's a setup. Shin reminds everyone that the base is just a decoy, and they should be ready for ambushers hiding in the surrounding area. The plan is simple: lure the Legion into the open, then have the 4th platoon unleash a barrage of firepower. As the squad begins their attack, things quickly go south. The ambushers reveal themselves, and it turns out they've got a new trick up their sleeves, some kind of unique long-range artillery cannons that start picking off processors left and right. The squad starts losing people fast, and Lena, monitoring the battle, analyzes the weapon's position but can't find a way out of the mess. Panic sets in as she realizes they're getting overwhelmed. In the middle of the chaos, Shin suddenly has a vision of Shiri's face. It startles him at first, but then he breaks into a smile, a disturbing mix of nostalgia and bitterness. Meanwhile, Lena, seeing the tide turning against them, frantically calls off the mission and orders the squad to retreat. She's rattled and vows to get the Spearhead more personnel, promising that Karlstall is planning to send reinforcements soon. But Shin, always the realist, tells her it's all cap. There are no replacements coming. The Republic won't send anyone new until the current squad is completely wiped out. Raiden backs him up, explaining that the Republic has no intention of letting anyone out of the 86th sector. They make empty promises to release them after 5 years of enlistment. But that's just another lie. They're stuck taking back shots from the Legion until every last one of them is dead. Lena doesn't want to believe it, struggling to accept the brutal truth. But Raiden lays it out. The Republic is terrified that if anyone from the 86th sector survives, they'll come back and start a rebellion. So, they keep sending them on suicide missions in the first combat ward, where they're almost guaranteed to die. It finally clicks for Lena. The Republic isn't sending the 86 to the front lines to protect the Alba. They're sending them to die. The realization hits Lena hard, and her voice trembles as she processes the weight of it all. She asks if the Spearhead Squad knew this all along, and they confirm they did. They've known from the start that no one who goes to the battlefield ever comes back. It's been a cruel, open secret among the 86, one they've accepted as part of their grim reality. Shin comes back from collecting his fallen comrades' tags, but there's a problem. He couldn't find one of the juggernauts and tells Raiden about it. Raiden, trying to keep his friend from spiraling, tells Shin it's not his fault. Shin manages a small smile, but the weight of their losses is clear. A few days pass as the squad waits for new orders to resume their mission. Raiden and Shin discuss the recent casualties, and Shin grimly predicts that the Republic will fall soon. Still, he believes that Lena will put up a fight before that happens. Shin also casually drops that he's found Shirey, which means Shirey's found him too and will be coming for him. For Shin, that's actually good news. He's been searching for Shirey for years. But he knows the others aren't so lucky. He asks Raiden what they're going to do about it, and Raiden, loyal as ever, says they'll follow Shin to the end. Shin smiles, appreciating his friend's unwavering support. Back in the city, Lena is doing some digging of her own. She finds the special orders for Spearhead's mission, and her heart sinks. The target is deep in Legion territory, the mission duration is marked unlimited, and there's zero support, not even a Predator missile to back them up. To make it worse, if they retreat, they'll be immediately destroyed. Lena realizes that everything the squad has been telling her is true. The Republic is sending them on a suicide mission. Upset, she goes to Annette, hoping for some help, but Annette brushes her off, saying there's nothing they can do. Lena, frustrated, snaps at Annette to stop acting like some edgy main character who thinks they're powerless. Annette fires back, telling Lena to stop acting like she's innocent when she's just as guilty. She takes Lena to the window and points at her neighbor's house, revealing that the neighbors were once scientists who worked on her dad's research team. Their families were close, but things changed when the war started because the neighbors were 86. There were 2 boys, one older, one her age, and they used to go to the same school and play together. But when the 86 were sent away, her classmates started bullying Annette for being friends with them. She wanted to help her 86 friend, but when he wanted to keep playing, she turned him down and they fought. When her dad suggested they help the neighbors, Annette refused and, in her words, snitched on those 86s. Her dad went along with it, and the next day, their neighbors lost all their social credits and were shipped off to the nearest re-education camp. Annette tries to justify her actions, saying she was just a kid and there was nothing she could do. But Lena's guilt-tripping is hitting her hard now. She accuses Lena of pretending to be the good guy when she's been complicit all along. Annette then takes Lena to an old research room and explains that the neighbors had a strange power. They could share their thoughts and feelings without speaking. She shows Lena the equipment they used to test and experiment on this power. It all started off like a game, but when the military found out, they had Annette's dad develop a communication device that mimicked this ability. The result was the para-raid devices they use now. Annette throws it back at Lena, asking if she knows how many 86 had to die to perfect this technology, trying to flip the guilt back on her. Later, Lena tells Shin to run away so he doesn't die on the mission. But Shin, ever pragmatic, tells her that everyone dies eventually. He insists that he and his comrades aren't going on the mission to die, they're following the path to their true freedom. Plus, he jokes, they've got plot armor, so they'll be fine. Lena, desperate, begs him not to fight, but she knows Shin has to keep moving forward. She can tell he's hurting, even though he laughs coldly whenever he talks about Shirey. Deep down, she doesn't want Shin to fight Shirey, even if he's now part of the Legion. Shin, however, is resolute. Shirey is a shepherd, and there's no way Shin is letting him off easy. He tells Lena there's no need for her to monitor or contact them anymore. He doesn't want her to hear Shirey's last words. This hits Lena hard, and she realizes she's about to lose her Pookie Bear. She collapses by her desk, devastated. Shin tells her that he and the Spearhead Squad are going to buy the Republic some time by taking out one of the Legion's shepherds, and Lena needs to survive until then. The next day, the remaining members of Spearhead Shin, Raiden, and the 3 second lieutenants prepare to leave the First Ward for good. They say their goodbyes to Lev, the mechanic, and the ensigns who are staying behind. Lev, ever the sweet old guy, gives them some farewell treats, and they climb into their juggernauts, taking Fido along for the ride as they head off to face whatever's next. On September 28th, the Spearhead Squad encounters the Black Sheep, and it doesn't take long for Shin to find Shirey. The recognition is mutual. Shirey spots Shin immediately and lets out a furious scream that startles the rest of the squad. But Shin just smiles, like he's been waiting for this moment. He tells his friends to hide in the forest where the Legion won't be able to spot them. Raiden, worried, asks what Shin plans to do, and Shin casually says he'll catch up with them after he takes care of Shirey. Raiden feels bad, wishing Shin had asked for help, but he decides to hold off the other Legion units while Shin deals with his brother. As the Legion opens fire, Raiden tells Shin to come back safe. Shin finds Shirey's location, and Shirey immediately goes goblin mode, unloading a barrage of fire at him. Shin evades the shots and counters, but his attacks barely scratch Shirey's unit, the Dinosauria, which is way stronger than the usual Legion units. This has Shin worried, but he refuses to back down. Another nearby Legion unit tries to attack Shin, but Shirey destroys it first. He wants Shin all to himself. Shin laughs, feeling the same way about Shirey. This is personal, just the two of them. Meanwhile, the rest of the squad is still fighting, but things are getting tense. Theo runs out of ammo and calls for cover while he reloads, which has everyone worried they might run out soon. Suddenly, Lena contacts Raiden and asks to use his left eye. Moments later, artillery shells start dropping, taking out some of the Legion. Lena had accessed Raiden's visual feed to pinpoint the targets and offer fire support, apologizing for her late arrival. Raiden, however, is pissed because using his eye for shared visual data like that is risky. It can cause blindness in handlers. But Lena doesn't care. Blindness isn't instant, and she's fed up with the Republic's nonsense. If they won't listen to reason, she'll do whatever it takes to support the squad. Earlier, Lena had gone to Annette to ask for help accessing the artillery control system and synchronizing vision. Annette, still bitter, refused at first, but Lena wasn't backing down. She confronted Annette, asking if the boy she abandoned was Shin. Annette froze, shocked to hear his name. Lena told her that Shin was in her unit, and his personal name was Undertaker. She even showed Annette a sketch she made of Shin's face. Annette, conflicted and anxious, didn't know whether to help or not, but Lena gave her an ultimatum: help her now or abandon Shin for the 3rd time. Annette realized Lena wasn't messing around and called her a devil. Lena agreed, saying they were both devils. Back on the battlefield, Lena asks Raiden where Shin is, and Raiden tells her Shin is locked in combat with Shirey, fulfilling his real objective, which makes him unable to hear the voices of the dead anymore. As the battle between the brothers rages on, Shin feels a strange satisfaction. He maneuvers through the trees, using them as cover to leap onto the Dinosauria, slashing at it with his Juggernaut's blades. He fires at Shirey, but his shots are stopped by a liquid micromachine shield that morphs into arms, grabbing Shin's Juggernaut and tossing it aside, severing his para-raid connection in the process. The other Black Sheep start to retreat, giving the rest of Spearhead a moment to breathe. But then they notice Shin's offline status and panic, trying to reach him. Through the visual feed, they see Shirey closing in on Shin and scramble to figure out what to do. Lena asks Kurina to provide terminal guidance so she can drop artillery on Shirey's position. The others hesitate, fearing she'll hit Shin too, but Lena insists she has a plan. Trusting her, Kurina follows through. Meanwhile, Shirey, now looming over Shin, starts talking about how fragile Shin's Juggernaut is and how he held back during their fight. He says he didn't want to hurt Shin and promises to apologize for everything later. Right now, he's just happy to have Shin with him again, just like old times. He rambles about reading Shin the lore of Hollow Knight again, but to do all that, he first needs to get rid of Shin's human body. As Shirey prepares to act, Kurina anchors her Juggernaut onto the Dinosauria. Shirey shifts his focus to her, but then he notices a missile coming down on them. Panicking, Shirey realizes he can't let Shin get hurt, so he uses Kurina's Juggernaut to knock Shin's Juggernaut out of harm's way, vowing to protect Shin at all costs. This takes Shirey into a vision where he keeps repeating the same vow to a little girl behind him, saying he loves Shin. The girl asks why he wants to hurt Shin if he loves him so much. Shirey turns around and sees Shin lying behind the girl, and he collapses, confused. The girl slaps him, snapping him back to reality just as the missile hits. Fortunately, the missile is a dud and only manages to wound the Dinosauria without destroying it completely. But Shirey doesn't back down, and the Spearhead Squad knows they need to act fast. They try to wake Shin up, watching his para-raid flicker on and off. Shin finally comes to when he hears Shirey's voice. Overwhelmed, he feels like Shirey is strangling him again, blaming him for their parents' deaths. Shin can't stop seeing Shirey's angry face, convinced his brother still hasn't forgiven him. Lena's voice cuts through, telling Shin it's time to put Shirey to rest. Shin pulls himself together, firing up his juggernaut one last time. He lunges at the Dinosauria, ready to end it. Shirey tries to counter with his liquid micromachine arms, reaching through to grab Shin. But Shin, determined, says his farewell and blasts Shirey. In his final moments, Shirey reminisces about the old days. He realizes that Shin doesn't need him anymore and touches his face one last time, apologizing. This surprises Shin, who reaches out for him, but it's too late. The Dinosauria explodes and burns, and Shin jumps back, watching it go down. Overcome with grief, he finally remembers Shirey's happy face and all the good times they had. Shin breaks down, crying as the memories flood back. His comrades watch silently as Shirey's unit burns, and Shin mourns his brother. By dawn, the battle is over, and the mood has shifted to a somber calm. The squad is satisfied with the outcome, knowing they did what they had to do. Lena contacts Annette, telling her the battle's over and Shin is safe thanks to her. But Annette dismisses her, saying she's not the one who saved him, and leaves. Lena then syncs up with the squad, thanking them for their hard work. Shin thanks her too, and the rest of the squad starts chatting with her, teasing her for breaking military protocol. Even Kierna compliments Lena for taking the battle seriously, and they all thank her for saving their lives and helping put Shirey to rest. Afterward, the squad talks about finding a place to rest and repair their juggernauts before continuing their journey. They say their goodbyes to Lena, hoping she can support the next group as she did for them. Lena, not wanting to let them go, tries to stop them as she watches their signals move away on her radar. They reassure her that they're choosing this path on their own terms, heading for a part of the map marked Unknown. Lena, left alone, doesn't know what to do with herself. She runs outside, crying on the road as she watches them disappear. The Spearhead Squad says their final goodbyes and goes offline, leaving Lena on her knees, overwhelmed with emotion and tears. The Spearhead Squad keeps moving through the reclaimed territory, a ghost land where no one lives anymore. Eventually, they come across a serene flower field and decide to take a break. Raiden uses the moment to ask Shin what his plans are now that he's left the army. Shin just shrugs and says he doesn't have any. Later that night, they all sit around together, reminiscing and laughing about their past experiences. Shin seems especially cheerful, even cracking jokes, but Raiden can't help but worry. After a while, Shin is the first to fall asleep, and for the first time in 9 years, he looks peaceful. His comrades notice how much better he looks now. His expression is softer, and he's smiling more often. They comment that Shin seems to have finally found some peace now that he's accomplished his 5-year goal of finding Shirey. They all know how much Shin has been through, the loneliness of seeing his comrades get clapped in battle and the burden of carrying on by himself. But getting close to Lena and having the chance to say goodbye while she's still alive seems to have lightened that load. Raiden quietly mentions that it's like Shin finally feels free, but it also makes him worry. Shin has been defined by his mission for so long that now Raiden wonders if Shin has anything left to keep him going. On the morning of October 14th, Shin wakes up earlier than the others and slips away quietly. When the squad wakes up and realizes Shin is gone, they start to worry. They spread out, searching for him, and eventually find him a bit later, standing in front of a Legion unit that's just sitting there, seemingly inactive. Raiden panics and rushes to get between Shin and the Legion, asking what the hell he's doing. Shin calmly explains that the Legion unit is injured and isn't a threat. He tells Raiden that he heard it calling out to him since the previous day. From the voice, Shin realizes that it used to be one of the 86 before it was taken by the Legion. As he steps closer, Shin tells Raiden that the Legion is saying it wants to go home. He pulls out his gun, ready to send it off with a headshot. The next day, the Spearhead Squad continues their journey, but it's clear their gear is struggling. One of the juggernauts is hooked up to one of Fido's wagons, and the other machines look too beat up to keep going, Fido included. As they make their way along the bottom of a cliff, they take it slow, keeping an eye out for any threats. After a while, Shin gets bored and asks Anju, who's piloting the Juggernaut, if they can switch places because he didn't bring anything to read and needs something to do. Once they've swapped spots, Shin makes a sudden move. He cuts the lines connecting the Juggernaut to the wagon carrying the rest of the squad. He slams into the cliffside, triggering a rock slide that blocks the path between him and his friends. Raiden, pissed and panicking, jumps off the wagon and tries to chase after Shin, but the rocks make it impossible. Through the para-raid, Shin tells them there's a Legion unit ahead that they won't be able to avoid, no matter what they do. He plans to take it on himself, telling them to hide in the forest where the Legion can't find them. If they keep pushing forward, they should eventually get away. His friends are furious, but there's nothing they can do in that moment to stop him. Later that night, Shin engages the Legion. He's quick and accurate, darting through the enemy lines, but his attacks barely make a dent in the Legion's lows. The lows start to retreat, and Shin quickly realizes they're setting up for an ultra-long-range cannon strike. Though the cannon misses a direct hit, the shockwave sends Shin's Juggernaut crashing to the ground. Meanwhile, the rest of the Spearhead squad refuses to sit idle and decides to go after Shin together. Shin gets back on his feet, but suddenly has a vision of the Shepherd commanding the unit. The Shepherd, in a cold, eerie voice, declares he'll clap anyone who dares threaten the princess. Shin is hit with a flood of memories from the Shepherd's past, showing how he was assimilated into the Legion during the war. The Shepherd keeps firing, blasting cannon shots one after another, even taking out some of his own lows in the process. Shin tries to get up, but his Juggernaut is badly damaged. Immobilized, he panics when he sees a low approaching. The thought of becoming a part of the Legion terrifies him, and he resolves to go out on his own terms. But just as he prepares to end it, his friends arrive, guns blazing, trying to divert the Low's attention. Hearing their voices gives Shin a moment of relief, but he knows they're outmatched. As the firefight continues, a Low manages to crack open Shin's Juggernaut hatch, and self-propelled mines start to swarm the area. The squad keeps firing, but Theo runs out of ammo at a crucial moment. While trying to reload, some of the mines reach him and explode, injuring him badly. Despite the dire situation, his friends keep shooting until they're all eventually overwhelmed by the enemy. The day before all this, Lena had visited Spearhead's base in the First Ward. As she explored the empty grounds, she found a notebook with a note tucked inside. The note had a drawing of a pig princess with the word "you" scrawled underneath a cheeky nod from the squad. They'd also written some heartfelt messages and signed their names. Lena found a photo of the squad together, which made her smile, but the joy was bittersweet. She knew they were no longer there, and as she held the note, she couldn't hold back her tears. Back on the battlefield, Shin slips into a dream. In it, Shirey wakes him up as a kid, gently apologizing for calling him all the way out there. He raises an open book, and as it falls, Shirey transforms into a knight. He picks Shin up, carrying him in his arms like a protector. After a bit of walking, Shirey puts Shin down gently, and tells him this is as far as he goes. Shirey tells Shin that he can make it the rest of the way on his own after all. He has his comrades now. He reassures Shin that he's grown so much and shouldn't let memories of the past weigh him down. But Shin feels a wave of sadness. He doesn't want Shirey to leave. Shirey continues walking away, urging Shin to remember him every now and then, but to live freely and find happiness. Shin tries to chase after his brother, but no matter how fast he runs, he never seems to get any closer. Stuck in place, he calls out for Shirey, desperately reaching for him. Suddenly, Shin's eyes snap open, and he finds himself in a medical facility. Disoriented, he sees people in hazmat suits peering through the window into his room. Before he can piece things together, the door opens, and a man walks in. It's Ernst, the president of the Federal Republic of Jayad. Ernst introduces himself and tells Shin that they found him and his friends after the Legion defeated and captured them. Shin's heart sinks as the memories of the battlefield rush back, his friends lying motionless on the ground. Panic surges through him until the windows on his left become transparent, revealing his friends alive and well, looking back at him. Later, they all chat about their last battle. The group scolds Shin for worrying them by charging into the fight alone. Shin, sheepishly, apologizes, knowing he scared them. A month goes by, and Ernst formally welcomes them to the Federacy as official citizens. The squad is skeptical, not understanding why Ernst is so willing to accept them, but he explains that the Federacy accepts everyone. He doesn't need a reason to bring children into his nation. Ernst then tells them he'll be their guardian from now on, assuring them they're safe. The 5 of them aren't Spearhead anymore, they're now members of Jayad, starting a new chapter. Meanwhile, the Federacy's lieutenant colonels report to Ernst about recovering the 86's juggernauts and their impressive combat logs. They're amazed by the squad's skills and express interest in working with them. However, Ernst immediately shuts down the idea. He's firm in his decision not to let the 86 become operators again. He doesn't want to replicate the mistakes of the Republic of San Magnolia. Instead, he wants to reward them with the peace they've long fought for. Later, Ernst takes the squad to his house. On the way, they ride through the bustling streets of the city, watching people go about their daily lives, enjoying the simple pleasures they've been denied for so long. They look out the car window and spot protesters rallying to save the 86 still trapped in the Republic, a sign that this country might actually be the ideal place for them to start over. When they arrive at Ernst's home, he introduces them to his adopted daughter, Frederica, who warmly welcomes them. Ernst then reveals that he's also adopted them, making them his children. This unexpected gesture leaves the squad speechless but grateful. Later that night, Ernst visits Shin in his room. He hands him Shiri's tag, which they found in his juggernaut. Time passes, and the 86 slowly try to adjust to their new life in the Federacy. They're exploring the city, trying new things, and getting a taste of what it's like to live normally, something they've never really known. Shin finds himself spending time at the public library with Frederica, where they meet a guy named Eugene and his little sister, Nina. It's weird for Shin, being around regular people, but he's slowly getting used to it. One day, Frederica drags Shin to the market, begging him to play a game and win her a stuffed toy. Shin isn't interested and tries to brush her off, but Frederica knows how to push his buttons. She pulls the typical little sister act, pouting and pleading until Shin finally gives in with a sigh. Despite the efforts to blend in, the itch for battle never really goes away. Kirina, feeling especially restless, vents to the others that she's tired of this peaceful life. She wants to go back to the battlefield where they all felt they had a purpose. Unsurprisingly, the rest of the squad agrees they've all been feeling the same pull. It's not long before they approach Ernst, laying it all out. They want to return to the front lines. Ernst, concerned, tries to dissuade them. He wants them to enjoy their newfound peace, not run back into danger. Frederica steps in, making her case. If Ernst forces them to live a life they don't want, he's no different from the Republic. She argues that they should be allowed to choose their own paths. Seeing her point, Ernst reluctantly agrees to let them go back to the military, but under one condition: they need to go through the military academy first. That way, when the war eventually ends, they'll have a better life ahead of them. Frederica backs him up, urging them to accept the deal because there's more to life than just the pride they take in their combat skills. Shin, amused by her speech, calls her a princess, but Frederica drops a bombshell. She's not just any princess. She's the last empress of the Jaidean Empire, the very empire that created the legion that destroyed their families. The squad is taken aback, but no one blames her. She was just a child when it all went down. Frederica continues, saying she admires their pride and asks if she can go with them. She has her own mission. She wants to save Kiria, her knight who died in battle and was absorbed into the legion. She reveals that Kiria is the same shepherd who attacked Shin before the Federacy rescued them. Shin, skeptical, asks how she could possibly know that. Frederica then reveals her unique ability. She can see people's pasts and presents. After enrolling at the military academy, Shin starts teaming up with Eugene during tactical practice sessions. For these drills, they're using new war machines called Vanagander, which are a bit different from the juggernauts they're used to. During one session, things take an unexpected turn. Marcel, operating another Vanagander, loses control, and his machine starts slipping towards Shin's Vanagander. Acting quickly, Shin pulls off a risky but impressive maneuver, dodging the incoming machine just in time to avoid a collision. It's a close call, and while it prevents an accident, it lands Shin, Eugene, and the other pair in hot water with the general. The group gets a solid scolding, but Shin ends up being praised for his quick reflexes that saved them from a crash. Not exactly how they wanted to end practice, but at least they're learning. Later, Lieutenant Gret, the commander of the Nordlicht squadron, invites Shin and his friends on a little outing to a nearby reclaimed territory. When they arrive, they're surprised to find a memorial site dedicated to their fallen comrades. Their old juggernauts are lined up like silent sentinels, and there's a stone monument engraved with the names of all their lost comrades, honoring their sacrifices. There's even the box where Shin kept his comrades' tags, carefully preserved. The sight hits the group hard, stirring up a mix of emotions. They're touched by the effort put into remembering their fallen, and they thank Greta for bringing them there. Gret, smiling, formally welcomes them to her squad, making it clear they're not alone anymore. They're part of something bigger again. Just as they're soaking it all in, Frederica shows up with Fido, Shin's loyal pet robot. Turns out, Greta had found Fido and restored him, giving the little guy a fresh new look. Shin is floored. He never thought he'd see Fido again, let alone have him back in working order. Fido, as cheerful as ever, immediately recognizes Shin and bounds over to him, practically vibrating with joy. Shin can't help but smile as he reconnects with his old companion. Later that night, Frederica sneaks into Shin's room for a chat. She tells him he reminds her a lot of Kiria, her old knight. She describes Kiria as a member of the Nuzan clan, just like Shin, who looked similar to him. He was serious all the time but never got upset with her, no matter how much she teased him. To give Shin a clearer picture, she even sketches a drawing of Kiria and shows it to him. Frederica adds that Kiria was a stickler for rules, always playing by the book, so if he were still alive, he and Shin probably wouldn't get along very well. Shin makes them some coffee and, curious about Kiria's past, asks why Kiria joined the Legion. Frederica takes a moment before explaining. After the Empire attacked the Republic, the Federacy was formed to rise up against the Empire. In response, the Empire retreated to a fortress near one of their borders, trying to hold their ground, but the Federacy caught up to them, and it turned into a bloodbath. Lots of people died. Kiria was caught in the middle of it all, fighting desperately to protect Frederica. The constant loss around him took a toll, and he eventually went insane watching everyone he knew die. With nothing left, he devoted his life to Frederica. However, things went south when the fortress fell. Ernst stepped in and took Frederica, hiding her away to keep her safe. To cover her escape, he lied and said she had died, even presenting her imperial mantle as proof. When Kiria saw the mantle, he was shattered, truly believing that Frederica was gone. Devastated, and with no will to run, he just stood there when the Legion came to scavenge the area, allowing them to take him. That's how he became a part of the Legion, a monster, and Frederica blames herself for it. She looks Shin in the eye and tells him that if things ever get too dangerous, he needs to run. She's scared he'll end up like Kiria, lost to the Legion, and she doesn't want to lose him too. Frederica tells Shin that he has a future worth protecting, something she knows he hasn't really thought about yet. She doesn't want him to throw it away. A few days later, Shin wakes Raiden up with a serious look on his face and tells him that the Legion is on the move. They quickly discuss the numbers and assess the situation on their fronts. Shin admits he's used to hearing the voices of the Black Sheep, but this time it feels way worse. He asks Raiden not to sync up with him this time, and Raiden gets it something's different, and it's better not to risk it. Greta, monitoring the situation, checks her radar and sees the Western Front, which is guarded by a neighboring nation. It's a mess. Their forces are getting wiped out, and the same thing is happening across other allied nations. Everyone's trying to pull their forces together, but it's looking dicey whether they'll be able to hold the line. Shin contacts Gret, who immediately asks for his status and whether the squad is ready to sortie. Shin confirms they're all set, which catches Gret off guard. She hadn't even given the order yet. Impressed, she tells them to hold the front line until the other units can get into position. Shin smiles and gives her a confident nod, ready to jump into action. The Nordlicht squadron heads out and teams up with another squad struggling to hold back the Legion. Shin quickly orders the allied squad to withdraw and regroup, saying they'll buy them some time. With their upgraded Regenleif's new war machines designed by Gretti's team, the Nordlicht squad is a force to be reckoned with. These improved machines let them pinpoint the rear Legion units and fire off multiple missiles at once. They can even scope out targets for long-range attacks, giving them a huge tactical advantage. Theo, ever the sharpshooter, uses the fallen structures to his advantage, maneuvering through the wreckage and sniping enemies from above. As the Nordlicht squad pushes forward, an allied unit arrives and asks them to hold their fire. The combat commander thanks Shin and his team for holding the line until the rest of the units could join the fight. He suggests they fall back and resupply, but Shin warns him that what they faced was just the vanguard. The main force of the Legion is on its way. If they pull back now, their entire combat zone will collapse. Instead, Shin proposes that the Nordlicht squad intercept the main wave and disrupt their advance. Without missing a beat, he orders his squad to follow him. They soon reach the main Legion formation and immediately open fire, unleashing a barrage of rounds to disrupt the enemy's advance. The battle intensifies as the Legion's main force arrives, and it's a chaotic clash of firepower. Back at the base, Frederica is doing her best to use her powers to locate Kiria, knowing he's the shepherd leading this main force. She's determined to guide the Nordlicht squad to him. Closing her eyes, she manages to find his position and syncs with Shin to relay the information. But when she connects, she gets a chilling vision of Kiria, grinning maniacally as he battles, just like he did when he lost his mind. The sight of him in that state terrifies Frederica, and she tries to warn Shin, pleading with him not to continue. But Shin is too deep in his battle trance. He disconnects from everyone, fully caught up in the thrill of fighting the Legion. It's like nothing else matters whether he lives or dies. He's just there to take down as many enemies as he can. Shin dives into the thick of it, tearing through the Legion's lows with close combat melee attacks, moving with a reckless intensity. He's completely in the zone, taking out one unit after another, until finally, he snaps out of it, breathless but victorious. With the Legion retreating, Greta orders the squad to return to base. When they get back, Frederica is visibly upset with Shin. She confronts him, saying he's acting just like Kiria, and breaks down in tears as she clings to him. Shin doesn't say anything, he just quietly pets her head, comforting her in the only way he knows how. One night, Shin gets summoned to the general's office. The general cuts straight to the chase, asking Shin if he can hear the voices of the Legion. Shin says yes, and, to prove it, points out the nearby territories where the Legion forces are currently lurking. Impressed, the general then appoints Shin to lead a critical assault operation that the allied nations, including the Republic of San Magnolia, have signed off on. The mission? Nordlicht is to take down Kiria's unit, known as the Morpho, a massive railgun machine that's a serious threat. Gret, overhearing the plan, immediately protests. She's concerned about the kids and argues that this mission could get them all killed. Why do they have to be part of it? She demands. But as the general and Greta go back and forth, Shin's attention drifts. He starts hearing the familiar voices of his fallen comrades, whispering to him from the past. They tell him that the reason they have to do this is simple, because they're the 86. Shin glances over his shoulder and is startled to see them, his old squadmates, standing right behind him. They're making light-hearted jokes, laughing about the general and Greta's bickering. It's like old times. They remind Shin that they lived and died with pride, and they thank him for carrying their memories and their tags all this way. One by one, they fade away, leaving behind their personal tags. Seeing them go hits Shin hard. He's been carrying the weight of their loss for so long, and now it feels like everyone's leaving him behind. Just when he's about to lose himself in the sadness, he catches a glimpse of Lena. She steps forward, telling him she'll never forget him. It's a small comfort, but it lifts Shin's spirits. He finds solace in the thought that this mission, this assault operation, might be his chance to reunite with his comrades if it goes south. With that in mind, Shin turns to Lena and says goodbye. Gretty gathers her squad and engineers, taking them to an old operation base hangar. Inside, she shows them the Nachzira, a prototype ground effect aircraft that's going to be their ticket to the Morpho. The plan is to use this aircraft to fly low under the radar, getting them to their target faster and stealthier than the usual route. With Shin's ability to sense the Legion and Greta's piloting skills, they should be able to make it to the Morpho without too much trouble. But there's a catch: the Nachzira can't turn quickly, so they'll need to avoid any ambushes along the way. Frederica isn't thrilled about the plan. She's worried they might manage to destroy the Morpho, but end up stuck in Legion territory with no way out in time. Shin, however, is unfazed. He tells her that the mission's priority is destroying the Morpho, everything else comes after. If they make it out, great. If not, that's just the life of a soldier. Frederica knows he's right, but it doesn't make her any less worried. Later, Shin visits Frederica in her room. She's been ordered to return to the base in the city, but she's flat out refusing to leave. Shin asks her why she's digging in her heels when she's the one who wants to save Kiria so badly. He assures her that he remembers Kiria's voice, so her presence isn't necessary for the mission. If she keeps asking Nordlicht not to go ahead, maybe she doesn't actually want to help Kiria rest, he suggests. He tells her to go home, but Frederica's too stubborn for that. She admits she wants to take down Kiria just like Shin took down Shiri, but she's scared that if Shin goes through with this mission, he'll end up like Kiria and she'll be left all alone again. Shin calmly tells her he's not Kiria. He's not doing any of this for her. This only frustrates Frederica more, and she yells at him for making her suffer the way Shiri made him suffer. Shin turns to leave, but Frederica grabs his hand, tears streaming down her face, begging him not to go. She can't bear to lose another big brother figure. Shin doesn't say anything more. He just lets her hold onto him for a moment. A month later, the squad loads their Rijin Leafs into the Nachzira, prepping for departure in 30 minutes. Greta steps up to give a quick pep talk, reminding them to give it their all and come back alive. She acknowledges that while they may be the 86, they're still just kids. Fighting might be their pride, but protecting them is her pride. Before they take off, Ernst contacts them to wish them good luck and to remind them to do their best. He's blunt, he doesn't want them to die, because if they do, he jokes he might just lose his mind and destroy the world. He gives them a direct order: come back alive, all of them, especially if they plan to keep fighting to the bitter end. The squad doesn't promise to stay alive, but they agree. As the Nachtsira makes its way toward the Morpho, it suddenly gets ambushed by a swarm of Legion units. Gret, staying calm under pressure, decides to drop the squad off early before they reach the planned location. She figures they can continue with the mission while she and the rest of the crew hold off the Legion units. Shin is visibly worried because this was definitely not part of the plan, but Gretty assures him she knows what she's doing. After dropping them off, the squad moves forward, using Shin's keen senses to guide them closer to the Morpho. Along the way, they're intercepted by more Legion units, but manage to hold their own, riddling the enemy with missiles. Finally, they spot the Morpho, still under repair, and immediately report back to headquarters. They get the green light to attack and start bombarding the Morpho with everything they've got. However, even in its compromised state, the Morpho is no joke. It begins to move, showing off just how powerful it is. As the battle intensifies, Shin starts hearing Kiria's voice taunting him, repeating over and over that he's going to clap him. The Morpho raises its massive railgun, ready to fire, but then it suddenly stops. Frederica urgently contacts Shin, telling him that what he's looking at isn't the real Kiria. Shin quickly scans the Morpho and realizes she's right, this isn't the actual Morpho. He orders his team to retreat immediately. Meanwhile, at a different location, the real Morpho is shown hovering, charging up its railgun before firing a devastating round at them. The shockwave messes with radar signals, causing communication disruptions back at headquarters. Panic erupts at HQ as they scramble to figure out what's going on. Some suggest launching missiles at the fake Morpho's location, but Ernst refuses, pointing out that they still don't know where the real attack came from. Others push for sending more defense units to buy time, but Ernst shuts that down too. He's not about to throw more lives away without a proper plan. They have to stick with the current strategy, or else he might just let the Legion tear them apart. After a tense wait, the signals return, and they realize the assault team is still alive. Much to Ernst's relief, Shin relays to his friends that the real Morpho is in a different location, and they quickly adjust their plan, moving out immediately. As they approach the real Morpho, they unleash a relentless barrage, but the Morphos got a force field up, blocking their attacks. Still, they keep firing, determined to break through. Kiria, meanwhile, reports to another shepherd named No Face, explaining that the Morpho had been in hibernate mode to avoid detection. He believes he's successfully lured Shin into a trap and destroyed him. No Face, satisfied, instructs Kiria to change locations. But just then, Kiria notices Shin is still alive, dodging and firing back with precision. Realizing Shin is still in the fight, Kiria decides to engage him directly. As Shin hears Kiria's voice, he gets lost in it, fully immersed and unable to hear his comrades calling out to him. No Face, watching from a distance, orders Kiria to retreat, warning that the Nordlicht squad has the upper hand. He forbids Kiria from continuing the fight, but Kiria, too caught up in his vendetta, can't stand the idea of backing down. He's ready to face Shin, who charges at him with a calm, almost unnerving smile. But eventually, Kiria pulls back, leaving Shin momentarily disoriented. As Shin watches the Morpho retreat, he finally snaps out of it and hears his squad's frantic calls. They're being overwhelmed by Legion units tracking back to their location. Shin quickly orders the squad to follow the Morpho, but the others hesitate, wanting to wait for backup. Shin, being stubborn as usual, refuses to wait, so the team ends up splitting in half. The former 86 members continue tailing the Morpho, while the others stay back to handle the Legion. The next day, Kiria is lost in thought, reflecting on Shin's personal mark, recognizing it as one from the Nuzin clan. He feels a twisted connection to Shin, believing that they both belong on the battlefield. But when he sees a red flag waving reminding him of Frederica's red mantle, anger flares up inside him. He remembers the close bond they shared and vows to take everything away from Shin, out of spite. Meanwhile, Shin receives a call from a lieutenant colonel who warns him that if they keep chasing the Morpho, they'll be out of range for any air support or reinforcements. Shin, undeterred, says it's fine, he doesn't want to pull back now because if they don't take out the Morpho, it'll just return. The lieutenant colonel reluctantly lets Shin do what he wants. Not long after, the squad discovers that Frederica has followed them to the battlefield by sneaking inside Fido. They're immediately angry at her for putting herself in danger, but she turns it around, lecturing them about their reckless willingness to die in battle. She reminds them that returning home was a direct order they were given, and it's one they need to follow. Shin asks Raiden to take Frederica back, but Raiden hesitates, knowing it'd be tough to get her through another wave of Legion units. Instead, he suggests accommodating her in his Regen Leaf. Shin, seeing no other choice, hands Frederica a gun, telling her that if things go south, she can use it to go out on her own terms. To his surprise, Frederica accepts the gun calmly, promising to give it back once the mission is over, holding on to hope that they'll all return home safely. The team keeps pushing forward on their journey, but it doesn't take long before they run into some Legion lows trying to ambush them. They manage to dodge the initial attacks and make their way to the top of a cliff, while the lows move along the base below them. Shin updates the squad on the distance between them and the Morpho, which has suddenly stopped moving. He tells them this is their chance to close the gap while it's stationary. Just as they're about to move, the lows below spot them and start firing. Anju gets hit and tumbles off the cliff. Luckily, she doesn't take any serious damage, but she ends up stuck in a ditch. She tells the others to keep going while she holds off some of the lows. The rest of the squad pushes forward, but they quickly run into another Legion unit blocking their path. This time, Theo stays back to handle the threat, allowing the others to move ahead. Meanwhile, Kiria is watching them on his radar, puzzled by why they keep splitting up, but impressed that they've managed to find him. He taps into the Legion's wide area network and sets a firing schedule for his unit. Warning them that all communications will be cut off until the firing schedule is complete. He doesn't want any interruptions while he goes after Shin. Frederica, sensing danger, yells at the team to dodge just as Kiria fires around at them. Kirina finds a good vantage point and starts firing back, trying to buy Shin and Raiden some time to press on. Annoyed by her interference, Kiria shoots at Kirina. Shin and Raiden start to worry that she might have been taken out. It's not long before Shin and Raiden are under heavy fire as well. Frederica and Raiden both get hit, with Raiden's Regen Leaf taking damage to one of its legs. Shin quickly tells Frederica to get into Fido, and Fido follows him while Raiden, injured, holds his position. Shin tells Raiden not to die, and Raiden just nods, doing his best to keep it together. Shin then instructs Fido to stop and hide with Frederica inside. He makes it clear that if they all get wiped out, Fido has to return to the Federacy. Frederica protests, wanting to speak to Kiria directly, but Shin insists that if she really wants to save Kiria, she has to survive. His words calm her down, and she agrees. Finally, Shin reaches the Morpho, and Kiria is practically giddy at the prospect of tearing him apart. As their battle kicks off, Shin's adrenaline spikes, and he goes full berserker mode. Kiria unleashes a barrage of shots, but Shin evades them all at lightning speed, impressing even Kiria. Shin quickly realizes that his attacks aren't doing much damage, so he decides to close in for a more direct assault. He thinks about how much he enjoys fighting, how it makes him forget everything else. Shin manages to close the distance and lands a strike on the Morpho. Meanwhile, Frederica, using her powers, decides to watch the battle unfold. She sees that Shin is trying to push the Morpho to its limits, hoping to make it overheat. Kiria, sensing what Shin is doing, gets annoyed but also impressed by Shin's strategy. In a twisted way, Kiria fantasizes about fighting alongside Shin and conquering the world together, but he knows Shin is too strong for that to ever happen. Frederica recalls Eugene once saying that Shin always has a trick up his sleeve, but she also knows that Kiria is no slouch. He's got his own tricks, especially in close combat. Just as she tries to warn Shin, he snaps back to reality when he sees the Morpho's sudden attempt to strike. Shin narrowly dodges, only to land right in front of a multi-barrel cannon. The cannon fires at him, but Raiden arrives just in time, shooting the cannon away from Shin. Kiria, seeing Raiden's interference, targets him next. Shin realizes that they're in deep trouble when his magazine runs dry. He radios HQ, reporting that everyone else has been clapped, and he's the last one standing. The Morpho is still operational, looming over him. Memories of his fallen comrades and Lena's words flood his mind, and he can't shake the feeling that they were saying their final goodbyes. Resigned but determined, Shin charges the Morpho, ready to meet his end, but just when he expects the worst. Backup arrives missiles bombard the Morpho from all sides, catching Kiria off guard. Kiria deploys the Morpho's wings to shield it from the onslaught, driving Shin back a bit. More missiles rain down, setting the Morpho on fire. Kiria, furious, is desperate to clap Shin no matter what. But suddenly, he has a vision of Frederica standing in front of Shin's Regen Leaf. She confronts him, asking why he's so fixated on destroying someone he's never even met, especially someone from his own clan. Kiria, tormented, tells her that all he has left is this urge. It's all that keeps him going because he believes Frederica is gone too. Driven by his anger, Kiria claws at what he thinks is Shin's Regenleaf until Frederica fires Shin's gun, snapping him back to reality. He's momentarily relieved to see Frederica alive, but his rage quickly returns, convinced Shin has taken her hostage. Frederica, in a desperate move, steps out of hiding and tries to stop him. She points the gun to her head, pleading with Kiria to save her. Kiria cries out, begging her not to do it, reaching out to her in panic. Seizing the opportunity, Shin charges at Kiria. But when Kiria spots Shin, he lashes out, trying to strike. Shin dodges with precision, managing to climb onto the Morpho. He asks Frederica where Kiria is, and she points him to the spot behind the main gun. Shin finds Kiria and blasts him. In that moment, Frederica imagines a different reality where both Kiria and Shin serve in her empire. She sees Kiria constantly scolding Shin, only for Shiri to step in and calm things down, taking Kiria away. Frederica tries to chase after them, but she can't reach. Kiria looks back at her and Shin, then turns away, joining Shiri and the others who have passed on. Frederica snaps back to reality, quietly saying her farewell to Kiria. After Shin delivers the final blow, the Morpho self-destructs. As Shin charged at the Morpho for the final time, he shouted to Kiria that the dead are the past and should stay there. But when Shin fired the last shot, Kiria grabbed his hand, the Regenleaf's anchor wires failing to eject just as the Morpho was about to explode. Kiria told Shin that it's time for him to go. Too, he's just as dead as Kiria is. He questioned why Shin, planning to die in this battle, was still alive. Even as Kiria let go of Shin's hand, Shin clung on, not wanting to let go. Kiria pushed Shin's hand away just as the Morpho erupted in flames. Shin made it out alive but passed out, slipping into a flashback of when Shiri had strangled him. He looked at Shiri's tag, hearing his brother telling him to let go, but Shin refused. He saw a vision of his fallen 86 comrades, thanking him for carrying them all this way. But then, there was another voice, one that kept telling him he has nothing left, no one who would miss him. It said he had no reason to live and was only kept alive to kill the Morpho. Shiri's voice cut through, telling Shin to be happy, but Shin snapped, screaming that Shiri doesn't get to tell him what to do after leaving him behind. He wondered why everyone around him keeps leaving him behind. Suddenly, Shin found himself at the 86 memorial site. The negative voice echoed in his mind, telling him he'd found his place to die. Shin knelt in front of the site, staring at the knife he used to carve the tags and at Shiri's tag. In the distance, he saw his friends and Frederica walking towards him. They offered to help him carry his burden, but as Shin reached out to them, his hand got cut off, and Raiden told him that they've left him behind too. Their images faded, and Shin begged them to wait, but they disappeared. He woke up in his Regenleaf, his hand still reaching for the sky. As the Morpho continued to burn, Shin realized his friends were still offline. He spotted Shiri's tag near his leg and tried to reach it, but his safety belt held him back. Frustrated, he screamed in defeat. Just then, a nearby Legion unit approached, taunting him for thinking it was over. Remembering the pain of running after Shiri, Shin begged the Legion unit to kill him so he could finally reunite with his brother. But before the unit could strike, it was taken out by someone else. Lina appeared, running toward Shin's Regenleaf to check on him. They exchanged brief words, and Shin informed her that his unit was behind him. He urged her to come with him so that his force could protect her, but Lina refused, saying she needed to stay and fight for her country. Shin, puzzled, asked her why she keeps fighting. Was she trying to die? Just then, Cyclops, the captain of Lina's new unit, arrived to check on her, and their synchronization unintentionally linked to Shin's device. Shin realized with surprise that she was his former major. After her talk with Cyclops, Lina told Shin that she refuses to stop fighting just because the odds aren't in her favor. She has people she wants to reach, people who inspired her, the 86. Walking closer, Lina formally introduced herself to Shin. He finally recognized her and whispered, "Major," which caught Lina off guard. He quickly cut off his device and asked why she's still fighting for people who are already gone. Lina replied that they taught her the true nature of the Legion, which is why she's still alive. If they helped her survive, it's because they want to see her again, and she intends to keep surviving until that happens. She pulled out the note and picture they had left for her and showed them to Shin, telling him she wants to take the 86 beyond the battlefield. Seeing the photo of his squad, Shin smiled. Lina told him that he should be proud of himself for fighting until the end. Overwhelmed, Shin began to cry, calling out to his major as he tried to open his Regenleaf's hatch to meet her face to face. but he stopped when he noticed the Legion's anicaps units flying nearby, heading towards the Republic. Cyclops rushed over to warn Lena, but just in time, more reinforcements arrived and shot down the anicaps. Cyclops spotted Shin's personal mark, realizing he was alive, but held back from telling Lena, remembering that she had never met Shin in person. Greta contacted Shin, congratulating him on completing the mission and revealing that the other 86 had survived as well. They quickly synced with Shin, relieved to hear his voice. They told him they were worried since he hadn't moved after the explosion. Shin, flooded with emotions, listened to his friends' voices, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Raiden assured him that the entire Nordlicht squadron had made it no one was left behind this time. Shin couldn't help but smile. Ernst also reached out, telling Shin he was worried about his son, making Shin chuckle. Ernst said he was considering a rescue operation to save the remaining 86 in the Republic and offered Shin and his friends the option to return. But Shin declined, saying they would stay in Gilead. He didn't care to save the Republic, but there were people he still wanted to protect. Ernst told him to come home and rest while Lena and her soldiers were escorted back to their base. Shin agreed. Frederica showed up, and Ernst told her she'd be facing consequences for her actions when she got home. Shin, surprised she had survived the Morpho's explosion, listened as Frederica explained that Kyria had protected her in his final moments. She apologized for not having Shin's gun anymore, but Shin assured her that it didn't matter. As Lena and Cyclops boarded an aircraft to head home, Frederica teased Shin about talking to Lena. Shin had never told Frederica about Lena, but with her powers, she had overheard everything. She suggested that meeting Lena in person should be Shin's new goal. Once the war is truly over, Lena is following the path Shin paved, and Shin should be there to meet her at the end. Shin just smiled at the thought. Back at the base, Greta played a recording of Lena and Shin's conversation, playfully teasing him about it. A year later, Lena makes her way to Gilead to meet with Ernst. He takes her to the 86 Memorial Site, a place that holds deep significance for her. Standing before the memorial, Lena quietly pays her respects to the fallen 86 who fought for the Republic, vowing once again to never forget them or the promise she made. She reflects on the sacrifices they made and reaffirms her commitment to honor their memory by fighting on. Afterward, Ernst leads Lena to meet the 5 members of the 86. She once commanded the very squad she's been trying to reach for so long. As they come into view, Lena's breath catches. She's finally face to face with the people she's admired from afar. Shin steps forward, standing tall, and introduces himself as the former captain of her unit, Undertaker. For a moment, Lena is speechless, overwhelmed by the reality of meeting them in person. Seeing Shin in front of her, Lena can't hold back her tears. All the emotions she's bottled up spill over, and she cries, realizing that she's finally caught up to the people she looks up to. Shin and the others watch as she lets it all out, their expressions softening at the sight of their former handler now standing as their equal. Lena wipes her tears and smiles, knowing that from this moment on, she will fight alongside them, just like she's always wanted. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.